Continuing on with my year of Star Wars reviews, we're going to be looking at one of the more popular aspects of the series, and that is the Clone Wars. Star Wars Clone Wars came out between 2003 and 2005 and was created by Genndy Tartakovsky, the creator of Samurai Jack, and follows the events of the Clone Wars between the events of Episode 2 and Episode 3, basically bridging the gap between these two movies in a really cool, fun, and action-packed way. This was a very important series to me when I watched it as a kid. In fact, it was really what got me into Star Wars from the very start. If you guys have watched my other videos, you might know that when I watched the original trilogy back in the day, I really didn't have anyone to really tell me about Star Wars or just get me into the movie, so I really had to discover them by myself, and that was watching them in the wrong order, of course, because I didn't know what order they were in. And I loved those movies, however, I just really wasn't into them as I was when I finally watched them many years later, and this was really what got me into the Star Wars universe, and one of my favorite things to come from this universe. In fact, it is my favorite thing to come from the Star Wars universe. Guys, this is a fantastic show that got many awards and was nominated for many things. It was critically well received and was just a really fun episodic show that didn't really have much in the way of plot or character, but was just an overall fun show that had episodic storylines that were only about 3 minutes until we get to some of the later episodes, which were about 12 minutes. But we had interesting, fun little stories with Yoda, Mace Windu specifically, Kit Fisto, Anakin and Obi-Wan, and I love this to death. I used to watch this all the time. I specifically remember and love watching the Anakin and Asajj Ventress fight. That is really entertaining. It's a fun little fight scene, and one of my favorite fight scenes in this entire series, and it's animated. I also really love the second half of this series when it gets to the more meatier episodes, which are about 5 episodes of about 12 minutes each, and they follow Anakin as he's become a Jedi Knight, and it really delves more into his character and really starts to set up the events of Episode 3, specifically with General Grievous being revealed as a villain in this show, which, when he is revealed, it is terrifying, it is tense, it is grim, and watching him slay Jedi as a little kid was really terrifying to me. He had an evil, terrifying voice that I absolutely loved, and he was just a really cool, interesting villain. It's sad to say that he was definitely not as interesting when it came to Revenge of the Sith, the movie, but he was really good here and had a really solid first opening here in animation. It was really well done. We get to see really cool stuff, such as the Battle of Coruscant, which is kind of hinted at the beginning of Revenge of the Sith. We see how the Chancellor is kidnapped by General Grievous, and it perfectly sets up the events of Episode 3, which I really love about this show because it really makes it feel so important and integral to the movies. It feels like a perfect middle chapter for Episode 2 and Episode 3, really bridging the gap, and that's what I love. Guys, this is a beautifully animated show. The 2D animation is beautifully done. Tartakovsky is such a great animator and visual storyteller. It's just a fun show to watch, and I don't think it gets talked about enough. I think people are more focused on The Clone Wars now, the CGI animated show, than they are with this show, and it's really sad that this show is not considered canon, even though it really doesn't contradict anything that happens in the CGI show, even though Asajj Ventress dies in this, but I mean, that's something that can easily have been retconned. Guys, I think this is a great show. It needs more appreciation through the years. It needs a Blu-ray, and I really just wish this was canon because it's a great show. It's one of my favorite animated shows, and it's my favorite Star Wars piece of media ever. Continuing on from there, we have Star Wars The Clone Wars, which was a CGI animated movie directed by Dave Filoni that came out after Episode 3 and was commissioned by George Lucas himself, who was wanting to make a successor series to the 2D animated Clone Wars in the form of this. And he was really impressed by what he saw with the animation that he started to greenlight a movie for them to make, which was basically just them taking a couple episodes that they had made and turn it into a 90-minute movie. And when you watch the movie, yeah, it doesn't feel like a coherent movie. It doesn't have the structure of a film. It really has the structure of 3 or 4 episodes that were combined together to make a running time of 90 minutes. And that's really disappointing when you start to watch this movie, and it really makes you wonder why this was even released theatrically, other than money, basically, or to get it to a more wider audience. Basically, this follows the events of Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan through the Clone Wars and sees Anakin having to have a Padawan learner known as Ahsoka Tano, who is a kind of brash young brat of a girl who is kind of his Padawan learner that he teaches throughout the movie and eventually the series, and follows them as they attempt to save Jabba the Hutt's son and return it to him. And yeah, this plot is absolutely just stupid and really just doesn't have a reason to have a theatrically released movie for it. Like, there's nothing about this that really feels cinematic. The animation, now, this is going to be an unpopular opinion. I just really don't like the animation style of the Clone Wars movie or the Clone Wars series. It's just so blocky and bland at times, but like, I do appreciate the designs of everything. In fact, they are really inspired by the designs of the Tartakovsky animated show, which I do really like. So a little bit of Tartakovsky still lives in this series, which I think is really cool. But we're talking about the movie here, and guys, this is just a very bland, boring, and stupid movie that really, there's not much to say about it. The animation isn't that great, especially compared to what the series would eventually do. It just feels very stagnant at times. The story is just not up to par, especially when it comes to Star Wars. There's just nothing cinematic about this story. I don't really have a connection to any of these characters that I'm introduced to. I think some of the ideas are interesting, but really just, it's really a bland movie overall that's really just not that entertaining. And if this was an episode of, like, the show, I could maybe pass this off as kind of just a bland, generic, fine episode, or something like that, but really, as a movie, it just doesn't work. It's really boring, it's bland, and just not that entertaining. Continuing on from there, we have the Clone Wars series proper, which is a much better entity than the Clone Wars movie, but this is a really fun show that really does delve into things that we saw in Clone Wars, where we basically see different fronts of the war of Clone Wars, and we see Anakin, Ahsoka Tano, Obi-Wan, Ki-Adi-Mundi, Kit Fisto, Mace Windu. Every Jedi you can think of is here, and may even have an episode dedicated to them, which I think is a really cool idea, and sadly, I don't particularly love this show, guys, and I know a lot of people love this show. Many people will consider it one of their favorite animated shows, and that's all fine, but I just couldn't really get into this show. And I think a lot of it has to do with, well, some of the animation and just some of the stories just being rather bland and generic, especially during those first couple of seasons where I'm just really not interested in what I'm watching, and I'm not interested in any of the new characters, such as Rex, the clone troopers, and specifically Ahsoka Tano, who is a character that many people love, and I understand perfectly well why people love this character. However, I just can't get into her. I just really can't gravitate towards her as a character. However, I can say, as the series went on and I was watching it for the first time, she did grow on to me, and I really started to enjoy her character, especially during her last couple of episodes in Season 5, which are some of the best episodes of the series. And talking about the episodes of the series, yes, the first couple of seasons to me are just bland, with just characters that I'm not really interested or invested in, but eventually the show does do some interesting stuff by bringing back Darth Maul and having more interesting stories to tell that really delve into the mythology of the series. Now, if you know the Clone Wars, it was a show that ran for 5 seasons, and then there was a 6th season that came out known as The Lost Missions. And honestly, that's my favorite season of the show. It really delves more into the mythology of the series, giving some context to stuff that is even pre-episode 1, which I thought was really cool and really interesting. And it's sad that this series got canceled before they could really delve into that stuff even more. And they would eventually delve into this more in the show Rebels, the successor series to the Clone Wars, but that's for another review. But this show, guys, is perfectly fine. It's perfectly animated. It's not anything spectacular, but it has great character designs. I like some of the stories, and eventually the characters do grow onto me, but eventually it's just too late. Maybe I just had to grow up with the series. When the series was released, I just didn't watch it because I really just wasn't interested into it. And then I finally started watching it and just couldn't get into it. And then finally, for the sake of this review, I finally sat down and watched all of it and was really entertained by it. But as I said, the earlier seasons to me just feel really flat and are kind of dull, but the series eventually does get more epic in its storytelling and a lot more fun along the way. So anyway, guys, with all that said, I'm going to give Star Wars Clone Wars a 9 out of 10. As for Star Wars The Clone Wars, the movie, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 10. And with Star Wars The Clone Wars, the series, it gets a 7 out of 10. Well, guys, I want to thank you for watching this review, and I hope you enjoyed it. Star Wars The Clone Wars Season 7 is coming out later this year. I'm really interested in seeing how that continues the story of the Clone Wars, as well as how it eventually ends it. I'm really interested to see where it goes, and see how it ends, honestly, because I'm really interested. Even though I didn't love the show, I really did enjoy watching it for the most part. And guys, these are just shows that I really think you should watch. I wouldn't particularly recommend the movie, but I would recommend both shows. But anyway, guys, that's all I got for you. So thank you guys for watching once again, and check back on my channel at the end of this month. I'm going to finally be reviewing Revenge of the Sith. So look forward to that. And as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. And I'll see you guys in the next review.